From the 15th to the 18th of July in every year, a great feast is held in honor of St. Rosalia, the patron saint of the city, in the town and on the mountain. On these days a number of people make a pilgrimage to the grotto above described, where the bones of the saint were found at a time when the plague was raging at Palermo. They were carried with great pomp into the town, and from that moment the plague ceased. The road from the convent to the temple, built on the summit of a rock, and visible to the sailors from a great distance, leads us for about half a mile over loose stones. Its construction is extremely simple, and not remarkable in any way. In former times its summit was decked by a colossal statue of the saint. This fell down, and the head alone remained unmutilated. Like the statue, the fane is now in ruins, and its site is only visited for the sake of the beautiful view. On our way back to the convent, my guide drew my attention to a spot where a large tree had stood. Some years before, a family was sitting quietly beneath its shade, partaking of a frugal meal, when the tree suddenly came crashing down and caused the death of 4 persons. The excursion to St. Rosalia's Hill can easily be made in 4 or 5 hours. It is usual to ride up the mountain on donkeys. These animals are, however, so sluggish compared with those of Egypt, that I often preferred dismounting and proceeding on foot. The Neapolitan donkeys are just as lazy. I wished still to visit Bagheria, the summer residence of many of the townspeople. One morning I drove to this lovely spot in the company of an amiable Swiss family. The distance from Palermo is about 2½ miles, and the road, frequently winding close to the sea, presents a rich variety of beautiful pictures. We went to view the palace of Prince Vasello. The proprietor appears, however, seldom to reside here, for everything wears an air of neglect. 2 halls in this building are worthy of notice. The walls of the smaller one are covered with figures and ornaments, beautifully carved in wood, with pieces of mirror glass placed between them. The vaulted ceiling is also decorated with mirrors, some of which are unfortunately already broken. The walls of the larger hall are completely lined with the finest Sicilian marble. Above the cornices the marble has been covered with thin glass, which gives it a peculiar appearance of polish. The immense ceiling of the great hall is vaulted, like that of the smaller one, and completely covered with mirrors, all of them in good preservation. Both apartments, but particularly the large one, are said to have a magical effect when lighted up with tapers. I spent a Sunday in Palermo, and was much pleased at seeing the peasants in their festive garb, in which, however, I could discover nothing handsome, nor indeed anything peculiar, save the long, pendant nightcaps. The men wear jackets and breeches, and have the before-mentioned caps on their heads. The dress of the women is a spencer, a petticoat, and a kerchief of white or colored linen round the head and neck. The common people appeared to be neither cleanly nor wealthy. The rich are dressed according to the fashions of London, Paris, and Vienna. In all the Sicilian towns I found the mob more boisterous and impudent than in the East, and frequently it was my lot to witness most diabolical quarrels and fights. It is necessary to be much more on one's guard against theft and roguery among these people than among the Arabs and Bedouins. Now I acknowledge how falsely I had judged the poor denizens of the East when I took them for the most thievish of tribes. The people here and at Naples were far worse than they. I was doubly pained on making this discovery, from the fact that I saw more fasting and more praying, and more clergymen in these countries, than anywhere else. To judge from appearances, I should have taken the Sicilians and Neapolitans for the most pious people in the world. But their behavior towards strangers is rude in the extreme. Never had I been so impudently stared out of the countenance as these Sicilian towns. Fingers were pointed at me amidst roars of laughter. The boys even ran after me and jeered at me, and all because I wore a round straw hat. In Messina I threw this article away, and dressed according to the fashion which prevails here and in my own country, but still the gaping did not cease. In Palermo it was not only the street boys who stood to gaze at me, the grandees also did me the same honor, whether I drove or walked. I once asked a lady the reason of this, and requested to know if my appearance was calculated either to give offence or to excite ridicule. She explained that neither was the case, but that the only thing the citizens remarked in me was that I went about alone with the servants. In Sicily this was quite an uncommon circumstance, for there I always saw two ladies walking together, or a lady and a gentleman. Now the grand mystery was solved, but notwithstanding this, I did not alter my mode of action, but continued to walk quietly about the town with my servant, for I preferred being laughed at a little to giving any one the trouble of accompanying me about everywhere. At first this staring made me very uncomfortable, but man can adapt himself to everything, and I am no exception to the rule. The vegetation in Sicily is eminent for its luxuriant loveliness. Flowers, plants, and shrubs attain a greater height and magnitude than we find elsewhere. I saw here numerous species of aloes, which we cultivate laboriously in hothouses, growing wild, or planted as hedges around gardens. The stems, from which blossoms burst forth, often attain a height of from 20 to 30 feet. Their flowering season was already past. October 10th. After a sojourn of 5 days, I bade farewell to Palermo, and took my departure in wet weather. This was the first rain I had seen fall since the 20th of April. The temperature remained very warm. On fine days the thermometer stood at 20 degrees or 23 degrees Reaumur in the sun at noon. The vessel on which I now embarked was a royal mail steamer. We left Palermo at noon. Towards evening the sea became rather rough, so that the spray dashed over me once or twice, although I continually kept near the steersman. At the commencement of our journey nothing was to be seen but sky and water. But the next day, as we approached the Neapolitan coast, island after island rose from the sea, and at length the mainland itself could be discerned. Capri was the first island we approached closely. Soon afterwards my attention was drawn to a great cloud rising towards the sky. It was a smoky column from the glowing hearth of Vesuvius. At length a white line glittered on the verge of the horizon, like a band through the clear air. There was a joyful cry of "Napoli! Napoli!" and Naples lay spread before me. End of Section 36.